I started dating Tony. Tony Lopez Frisquet was the son of Cuba's finance minister, Castro's finance minister. I learned so much. You have to understand where I was coming from, how I got interested in anti-Castro activities from the beginning, because this helped get me connected with the CIA activities later. And people said, how did you get involved? I knew a heck of a lot of people that ordinarily you wouldn't know, or I knew about them. Starting with Nicholson himself, you cannot find his name anywhere. You go try and find Knut Nicholson, yet we've got a great big newspaper article about him in our high school newspaper. How he was, he had been a spy and pretended to be pro-Hitler, and his Norway and all these people, all his people hated him. They thought he was really pro-Hitler when he wasn't. And I told Lee about this, Lee Oswald, because Lee was pretending to be pro-Castro and he wasn't. This guy, I understood Lee's position because Knut Nicholson's family disowned him. They would have nothing to do with him. There were so many things he couldn't tell them because he was really a spy, you see, for the OSS. So, it was wonderful getting to know this man and that he was interested in who I was. I was just a young girl playing chess in the library when I met him, and wow. But because of him, all kinds of equipment and science stuff started pouring into my high school, and I got my own lab. Now later, when I was doing cancer research and they see these lumps and everything developing on the mice I had, because at first I was just doing subcutaneous, I was getting doing skin cancers and things like that just to figure out what was going on.
Did you create the cancers? Is that like you actually were able to create cancer out from materials that wasn't there?
That's right.
And you used that from the...
I used ultraviolet light. In fact, they actually installed ultraviolet lights and they got so scared because some idiot, I shouldn't say it like this, some silly child opened up a cage full of my control animals and they got loose. They were running all over the biology lab and everything like that, running up girls' skirts and stuff, and everybody was, because they weren't scared of people because of me, They're screaming and all that, so they moved my lab under the stadium all by itself, because everybody was scared to death of it, what I was doing. And so there I was. When the doctors came, they came to inspect my stuff. See, it was under the stadium. And they looked at all my files and everything I'd done. Oh my gosh, I had done everything that was precise, and everything. So they went to the principal and to the different doctors I'd worked with. Anyway, they closed my lab down immediately because it was too dangerous what I had been doing. Yep. And I was not allowed to take my mice to the science fair because they were afraid they had some kind of contagious cancer or whatever. And so I wasn't able to get any big awards. I did get some, but, and I got like science search and, stuff like that. But it didn't matter because I'm going to graduate now and I've done it and I'm going to go to Roswell Park. Right? But here I've got these mice. What am I going to do with these? Now, the germ-free mice, they died, right? So I don't have to worry about, but I still have all the controls. And I had about 75, maybe 80 mice left from various, and the little innocent things. What am I going to do? I'm not going to kill them. They're innocent. Nothing happened to them. They were the control animals. So I'm lugging them along across the lawn. I'm going, where can I put these mice? I didn't want anybody to take them and do experiments on them or anything like that. And people were scared of them. They're afraid they had some. Nobody would take them. So I'm lugging them along, and I cross the bridge, and I see, here's the Manatee River. Actually, is where it's Crete going. And there's this great big banyan tree and all kinds of bushes. It's just they all in. The newspaper. I'm on my way to Roswell Park, and it's so wonderful. It's like not from second. Deeper inside, it says, Oh, it says I was working white marker. It says further down, buried, okay, more pages down, it says Women's Tea Party was completely annihilated by an invasion of white mice. And they were screaming and yelling, and they even brought cats in, and the mice weren't even afraid of the cats. I was really wanted to get out of Brainerd real fast. I can't believe it. Of course they knew it had to be me. Who else is white mice? Where did the white mice? I mean, it's gross. It really is. I did not know that on the other side was a church and a women's tea party was going on in the garden there with their beautiful banyan tree and the bushes. The mice were everywhere and they could not get rid of them.
So you've gotten into the newspaper for lots of different reasons.
Yeah. Yep, there are other reasons, and some of them very sad. But anyway, so let's go forward. So I have developed and helped enhance the 60 RPMI 1640 formula. I have now wanted to become a nun. And so I went to St. Francis College because they promised to put me through medical school, but I'd be a nun. Because I was told by the doctors due to this terrible problem I had when I was 5.5. I had peritonitis, gangrene, abscesses, bowel obstruction, okay? And all of that from a ruptured appendix. And my parents were partying and didn't notice. It's really sad that they were too young. My mother was only 19 when she had me. I'm sorry, 17. She was 15 when she got married. She loved motorcycles. My dad was the president of Steeds of Steel, and he was a celebrity in South Bend. He had his own radio program and everything like that. And anyway, they fell in love, and it was a marriage that was made in hell. Yeah, my mother was a very strong-willed woman. I mean, she wanted her own Harley, and she ended up with an Indian, okay, she was a fierce woman, all right? And they had fights, but they loved each other. It was sort of like Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. And he had his own TV station, and everything, and my sister and I would sing on it and so on, and we were the little darlings. And so I wasn't afraid of being before the public or anything like that.
Spotlight.
Yeah, it was just natural. Yeah, because my dad was just into everything. It was amazing.
Did he work for RCA Victor?
Well, he worked for Raytheon, and our family was given clearance by the CIA or OSS or whatever you want to call it, because it was in 52, okay, to work on the Redstone rocket project. And we went out to Sandia, and my sister and my mother went off shopping and stuff, all right? But I got to go with my dad to see the rockets and everything because of my big mouth using technical language, so they let me in with my dad, And I was very young, of course. I mean, 11 years old and all that kind of thing. But actually, I think I was still 10. But anyway, my dad was going to be this is in Albuquerque. My mother said, well, where are we going to live? They said, well, there's a problem here because we're doing all this stuff, trying to catch up with the Russians and so on. And if things get bad, we're going to have to put barbed wire around everything, and you won't be able to leave the compound, and because it's going to be top secret, and so on. My father was ready to help develop the rocket was like 30 miles off when it wasn't aimed at something. And he knew how to fix that, okay? One of the things he worked on was, about the old television dials, and actually some of the washing machines still have it. You go click, 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 click. Well, those are magnets. My dad invented that process. So, of course, he sold the rights, but he got the money. For years, he got patent money until the patents ran out, So he was only in his 30s when he retires to Florida, okay? That's where he went. Well, he went there because what happened is that my mother refused to be locked up behind barbed wire. And that caused my father to start drinking a lot. And it broke his heart. And he became a different man, and he was never the same after that. It was what he always wanted to do. But she was a very strong-willed woman, and a difficult woman, but very strong in her own right. And she was in art. She could write. She wrote a book. They were intellectually compatible, but she was ferocious. And he loved that in her. So here we go. I had that experience when I was 5.5. I was actually pronounced dead. My grandfather had come in and taken me to the hospital when he said, she's burning up. Put my head out the window, probably saved my life. It's the cold air. But it went right up to the top of the thermometer. My temperature was just terrible. And they gave up on me, and apparently my heart stopped beating. I had an out-of-body experience, and so I know these things are real. And
wow,
it was
at 5.5 years old.
Yes, but it's very vivid in my mind.
Is that your first childhood memory?
Oh, no. My earliest memory is when I was very young. I couldn't even walk yet because it was violence. I saw my father beating my mother, and she was pregnant with my sister. I wasn't even a year old. That's my earliest memory.
Wow.
But it was a violent thing. That's why I can remember it. And I was screaming and yelling for them to stop hitting her. And there are only 15 months between me and my sister. So that she wasn't born yet. I can remember my mother's protruding stomach. So that's my earliest memory.
Wow. And
I'm not the only one. There are other people that have early memories too. They just don't really, they can't prove it usually. How can you? That's your earliest memory. I learned to read when I was 3. I learned to read upside down. Because people would be reading to me, and I was following them, upside down what they were. So the first word I memorized was information. Read it upside down because my mother had the telephone, the directory there right near my crib, because I was still in a day bed. It had been turned from a crib to a day bed. Okay, so it was still the same piece of furniture. And so I was sitting there, and I could see her, and she, at that time, they used to call the operator. She put her finger on the word and say, information. And I saw it upside down, information, so many times I figured it out, and that was the beginning of my ability to read.
Was that the key to intellectuality, is to teach your kids to read upside down?
No, I don't recommend it. I don't. It's just my incessant curiosity, really, and everything. I got in an awful lot of trouble when I was young, but I had a lot of friends, and lots of friends. I always did. It was wonderful being alive, especially after that experience. So I was in my experience, the out-of-body experience I had. I was out of my body. I could look down and see what was going on. It was dreadful. There was blood all over the sheets and everything. So I turned and I started walking down. It wasn't a tunnel or light like that. It was like a big white lake frozen. I must have been freezing, all my blood was gone or something, And as I'm walking, I'm going closer and closer, and there's something gorgeous there. I want to be there. It's beautiful, like forest and gorgeous. All these people are standing there, and they're saying, go back, go back, go back. A whole bunch of people, hundreds. I didn't want to, but I was an obedient little girl, and I turned around and went back. By then, I'd been wheeled out. My head was covered with sheet, and the priest was there, and they lit the candle, and he's going to pull back the sheet and anoint me, hoping my spirit's still there, and everybody's crying, and I sit up, and they all screamed. And my family remembers that, And the doctor said, what? And they wheeled me back in real fast. Blood, we need blood. I have type O, and they used everything they could find. And see, they didn't even sew me up or anything. They just thought I was gone, And the black sheep of the family happened to be there as well. And he had cheated my grandmother out of a lot of money during the Depression and sold her property behind her back, and forced them to move to a farm and lose their home, in South Bend and everything like that. But he came, his name was Leo. And Leo Hoffer They laid him down beside me and they put a tube from his arm right into mine because he had such high blood pressure. That blood came right into me. He had type O. Saved my life. So, and I remember that, you know, I mean, I was conscious enough and I was in horrible pain. Oh, brother. So I was in the hospital altogether 1.5 years because I had perforated stomach and all kinds of other problems going on. Oh, sorry about that. Let me just, I'm sorry. Hold on.
That's okay.
Sorry, can't talk. I thought I had turned that thing off, but at any rate, I have people all over. I try to help them and with their cancer problems and so on. And we have saved people, especially I sent out over 200 COVID handbooks to people who asked for them between in 2020, starting in February 2020, telling them, you know, what was the matter with the vaccine. I looked at the genome and you could see it had been handled with a machete. Okay. There was absolutely no way could this evolve that way by natural causes. It would have killed every animal along the way. I mean, it couldn't have passed it on the way it was set up. And boy, those parts of that genome vanished. Okay, they took them away. And it's absolutely shameful the fact that our government had virologists working on it with only a portion of that genome. So you'll see partial. They never even looked at all of it for over like 1.5 years.
Wow.
Meanwhile, over in Europe, they're getting the whole genome. And, you know, if you want to go look at it and what they're finding out, you have to go over there. And we didn't do that. How could we be so careless? Because they didn't want us to see anything. They didn't want any more virologists to look at this. And I don't know how many of these records still exist, but I mean, I saw them and collected them and showed some of them in the handbook and so on. And I advised people, I said, don't take this. This is man-made and it's no good. This thing is just enhanced function. And I've received many thanks. And sadly, people who, in their own families, people who didn't listen, we've had deaths from those who took the vaccine. One person I know, she took everything. She's had COVID 5 times. And she's in bad shape, okay? And others were forced to take it or they lose their jobs and they're ill. We're working with them, showing them protocol, how you can escape some of the long COVID and so on. So I've kept up with all of that. It's been an immense interest to me, everything that has to do with cancer and viruses and so on because of what I got involved with. I hope I'm not boring any of you.
No, this is definitely fascinating information.
Okay, well, there's more to come, and it has to do with the innocence of Lee Harvey Oswald and how he was involved in the Kennedy assassination, what really happened.
So how did you guys met Chess? And
okay, so here I am.
Do you think that he was a CIA set up to meet you? Like, would you think it was something?
Oh yeah, I do now. I didn't at the time. Other people had to convince me. I mean, it seemed so natural the way it was done. Very slick. Okay. So anyway, the doctor said I couldn't have any babies. Yeah, I had all these operations. Even had to go back when I was 10 for more operations. Okay. I had this big scar on the right side of my stomach, you know, from all that going on. I had tubes down my nose and tubes in my mouth and coming out of my stomach, and they punctured me so many places. I mean, they're in the end they were doing it in my head and in my ankles and hands because all the other veins had collapsed. I mean, it was just like that, and I had nothing to eat, just sugar water. They didn't know much about vitamins. I don't know how I survived, really. It's just like miraculous that God wouldn't let me die. So anyway, let's fast forward now. So I'm decided I want to become a nun because I do not want to have, I love the boys. I had a wonderful time with all these boyfriends and everything. I sent you a picture of me in a swimsuit so you can see what I look like. And I don't know whether you got it or not, but anyway, Lee saw it. And Lee saw more than that. So at any rate, I was normal normally attracted to guys, but there weren't any that were very smart. I mean, very hard to find intellectual people. I'm at St. Francis, and they have set me up with Eli Lilly and others to work on, and I have sent you the abstract, I believe, showing that I gave a paper. This is after Roswell Park on melanogenesis, and using an advanced formula, the one I had already worked on, but I enhanced it and got melanoma to grow faster. At the same time, told me on this. He's publishing articles for my parents. I wanted to become a nun. My father, who was not really, he was a nominal Catholic. I didn't know that he had never been baptized. He just was. My family would let him marry my mother. And at 50, so I mean, he pretended a lot, of things. And my dad kidnapped me from St. Francis. I am go back and forget about your so. You'll own it. So what's the problem? The problem is I want to be a scientist. I don't want to be an accountant and work for your water conditioning company. I'll have you arrested and bring you back in handcuffs.
Wow.
Oh, he was so adamant. So I was heartbroken, and not only that, but we lived on an island in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't even get out of there. Well, my grandfather and my aunt, who had all people, remember, by the way, they had also had me learn Russian. They wanted me to be able to translate what was going on in cancer research in Russian. So I actually, these military officers were interested, and they felt this is just not right. They contacted Senator Smathers, and I had been offered many tips, of course. And I was going to do like I could, and I wanted to serve my people. I wanted to serve humanity. I wanted to help people, and not just waste my time in labs all the time. But I also, of course, wanted to go back to cancer research, and that was promised. And here now I am in my dad's control. Me $1 so I can eat lunch, and watches me eat it, make sure I won't leave, if we go across the street and get some lunch. And I'm locked up at night. I mean, so Senator heard of this. He had a scholarship that had been waiting for me, okay? And he said, well, you can have it. But wait a minute. It's February 1962. You can't have it for a long time. How am I going to get in? I mean, what? That's United States. Senator Smathers, with all his power, rigged the computer and made it look like I'd always been there and got me in.
Wow.
Yep. And so there I am, all of a sudden, in February 1962. I am now at University of Florida. But I've got a problem. My dad has found out. He has sent the police to arrest me. I'm serious. This has all happened. I mean, and I was so fortunate because the Dean of Women, her name is Marna Brady. used to be a Marine of all things, tough as nails. And Smathers told her all about what had happened to me. And she said over my dead body, she actually put a chair against the door, and they're coming, the police knocking on the door. She said, do you have a warrant? No. Well, you have to have a warrant. Well, they went off to get a warrant for my arrest because I'm a minor and my father I'm only 18. So, I mean, they can do this, you see. Actually, I wasn't even 18. Yeah, I guess it was 18. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I wasn't 21, and that's the problem. So right away, she said, we got to find work for you to do. Work. What are we going to do? I said, labs. She signed me up for 3 different labs. And I got grant money for each one, for 10 money with the craft shop. So by the time the pay the door said, now what are you going to do? And I felt, do you think I wanted to go back and see my parents? This is very important because later people are going to say, well, why didn't you go home? Well, now you know why. Because it won't be long after this. This is 1962. By now, I hate President Kennedy. Now, why would I hate him? Because about what Castro had done. He as informants to CIA or something like that. Whatever it was, Castro had kept them, hung them up, tortured them, blow torches under their armpits, and they're friends, they're Cubans. I learned lots more, and I just hate Kennedy because he was being blamed for the Bay of Pig. By July 61, this man is no good. This man betrayed us. And I believed them. I took Lee Oswald. He's the one that taught me that Kennedy was a good, basically betrayed by the CIA to take the blame. Well, get it through. Here's the Iron Curtain, he said, while I was still a teenager. He made it by 2 days. Now, when did Lee Oswald join the Marines? All you're going to hear is that when he turned 18, he joined, right? He actually joined the day after the Hungarian Revolution, when he's help us. He watched those tanks roll in on TV and stuff. And he joined the Marines the next day. You're not going to find that in the news. He did that because he wanted to fight. Okay, they don't. So there it is. And it's cruel the way that they will leave out things about Lee that shows that he was a patriot and that he was one of us. He wasn't one of them. But that's another story. And I've got a lot of information like that and have had to share it with people because they did not know these things. I'll give you an example. When Lee Oswald makes out his passport application. Now, imagine this. This man has come back from the Soviet Union. He was there for 30 months, comes back with a Russian wife and child. He's making out his new passport. Why? Well, heck, your old passport has Soviet Union stamped all over it, and nobody's going to want to see that, right? So he's getting a new passport. And what does he put on it? He puts on and you know what? Years and years and years went by, 40 years, more than 40 years. Nobody ever noticed that Lee said that he was married to Marina Prosakova, okay, the Russian woman, on April 31st, 1961. Now, what's wrong with that? There is no April 31st, and it's right there on his passport application. That sense of humor of his. He said, I could put my name as Santa Claus, and they still would have approved it. And he put that in there. Yes, that he was married on a date that doesn't exist.
Wow.
And nobody noticed. all these researchers, all these years, I had to point it out to them. Because he pointed out to me, he said, see how funny this is? He said, you know, and he showed me something else. I couldn't prove the other that I'm telling you now. They finally came out with the color copy, and by the way, it's in my book, showing the application in color, because the two inks used, the ink used by Lee Oswald, the ink used by Arthur Young, who actually wasn't Arthur Young, his name was really Charles Thomas. He'd been flown in specifically to pass Lee Oswald's passport in only 24 hours, along with a stack of others, so it wouldn't be noticed. All right. This man already knew Lee Oswald, and I contacted his family and proven to them that I knew him because he had like tattoos on his fingers. And he used to be working at the border, at the Canadian border there at Buffalo, New York, that area. And I talked to Lee about my being in Buffalo and Roswell Park, and he told me he'd been there too. And I learned a lot of things about that. Charles Thomas used to be with the customs. He was in charge of customs at the border crossing there. Lee actually, when he was about 12, crossed the border into Canada. Now this kid was going all over the place. Now think, at 19 he goes to the USSR. So really 12, he goes to Canada. I mean, it isn't far of a stretch. And the whole family. I said, well, you know, when he went to the, he skipped school a lot, and Charles Thomas stopped him there at the border. And this is the whole family. Now, Charles Thomas was dead, but his dad was still alive. I mean, his son was still alive, and grandchildren and all that. And they knew, they had photographs of him at the border up there, of their grandfather, Charles Thomas. I said, well, you know, Lee said, I want to go to Crystal Beach. He said, okay, I'll put you on the bus to Crystal Beach, but you have to be back, you know, before it's really dark. So he did that. He said, if you don't come back, I'm calling your mom and the police and everybody else, you know. So let him over. But they come out with a photo, and it's in my book, showing Charles Thomas there at the customs. And what do you see? You see a bus in the background that says Crystal Beach. They just flipped out because they knew. How did I know that Lee Oswald told me that he went to Crystal Beach on a bus, and that it was Charles Thomas at the border there who let him in? And they got a photograph showing him and the bus saying Crystal Beach. So we have, so you go online and it'll say, I'm a fraud, I'm a fake, and I don't have any witnesses, and nobody, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I can't do anything about those files because they're there forever. I can't answer them. I can't defend myself or anything. They're just there. And it looks awful because, of course, the search engines, that's what they bring up. They bring up all the bad stuff. Trying to find 23 years of my interviews and stuff like that, it's really hard. A lot of them are now on Rumble. Hip, hip, hooray. All right. So, all right. So here I am. I am going to backtrack now. I'm at St. Francis College, and then my dad had me locked up. I'm at University of Florida, and I'm working. They're having me work on radiation tagging and all that. And I have documents and so on for this stuff, and that they were doing that. And I developed a blood test by tagging cancer cells. Think about this. If a cancer cell divides and it's been tagged with radiation, it's going to only have half the radiation in it when it divides, all right? And if it divides again, it's only going to be 25%. So you have to do the blood test pretty fast to see if you've injected somebody with cancer cells and that person has not sifted it out in their immune system, haven't conquered it, that radiation tag will still be there in the bloodstream. That those cells will still be there. And that's bad news. That means that person will not be able to overcome it, most likely. This is before 72 hours and after 48 hours. You're supposed to have sifted all that out of the system. If you can still get a signal, that's bad news. Well, I developed that test. It would take something like 40 years before they developed it again, because I got kicked out of cancer research for objecting to using unwitting prisoners. They were going to inject the material I'm going to tell you about into prisoners at the Jackson State Hospital who had been brought in as volunteers for cancer research rather than to be on the chain gang. And if it worked, it would kill them. And they weren't being told this.
Well, I was going to ask, why would anyone want to inject anybody with this stuff? And then now you answered that question. That was my question I had in my head.
Well, that's right. They weren't being told. And I objected. And at the end of this interview, I'm still on, I'll tell you what happened, because that's how come I'm not in cancer research. It didn't stop me all these years from keeping up with everything, because that was my heart. That was what I wanted to do. And so I know the stuff. And that's why it's so outraged that we don't have cancer cures. We should have a dozen of them by now. And it's just disgusting that we don't.
Well, I think that we do, but they've just been suppressed so much.
Well, that's right. We do have them, but you'll get arrested. The doctor will be arrested, you know.
Yeah, it's actually against the law, they say, to cure cancer, which is crazy, because you would think that you would want it to be cured. But I know lots of people that have beat cancer in different ways with fasting and cannabis oil and you know, different things. So there is actual cures for it, but they're all, as they say, crazy. No, those are conspiracies. No, you shouldn't poison yourself with dried apricot seeds or different things that does help with some of this stuff.
Well, watch out, the apricot seeds and vitamin B19, it isn't so. There are some of these things aren't really that way. It's because these same people were actually improving their diet so many other ways, all right, doing so many other things well, that it worked. But it itself, almonds are not that they're not good for you, they are, but there is no such thing, honest, as B19. I don't care if you believe me or not, eat right, and, you know, get that omega-3 and get your antioxidants and so on, and take care of yourself. Stop eating sugar, for heaven's sakes, you know. Try a little coffee instead. So, you know, there are many ways to avoid cancer, and especially my family. I mean, all right, so here we are. Judy is now at University of Florida, doesn't want to be around her parents and all that. Her hormones are raging, though. She's been dating really, really interesting people. University of Florida was mostly men at that time. There were, of course, there were some girls, but they had only been about 10 years co-ed, okay? So, and most girls just aren't interested, or they look like horses, their faces. You know? I don't know why, but a lot of girls who interested in the sciences, sometimes they turned that way because they felt maybe that they didn't have any chance anywhere else to succeed. I don't know. I'm just being maybe prejudiced, but most of the girls were athletic that were there, as well as interested in the sciences, and they just, well, they're big girls, most of them, and I was very small, but ended up being on, I got 4 athletic medals while I was there. And one was in basketball, and I was so short. That's because they kept running into me, and I became a specialist at the free throw line. They'd foul me so often. They didn't see me. Where is she? Oh, just so I had managed to actually be on a wheel even. Anyway, so I found it, and then, but I finally found somebody who beat me in chess, and he was cute. What? A cute scientist? They exist? Smart? Higher IQ than mine? If this man, by the way, now has many. I need to say that didn't have as many chances to excel in the sciences and all that. It's amazing, the prejudice. Now, of course, some did, but my father even challenged me. Show me one famous scientist. And Marie Curie. He said her husband was with her and then she died. You know, there weren't that many when I was rising like this. I was still being asked by reporters what's going on. Well, I was doing work there at Shands Hospital, and I was just coasting along. But I fell in love. I thought it was love. I fell in love with sex with Robert Baker. Over 6 feet tall, looked like Superman with his glasses off, okay? And he could beat me at chess. Oh my God, he could beat me at chess. So I was in love. And poor thing, I say that because he did the best he could. I know he did, but he had Asperger's and he was narcissistic. To give you an idea, when he died, none of his 5 children came to his funeral. But then again, he didn't leave them any money either in his will, not 1 penny. He didn't think of it. It wasn't that he hated them, he just didn't think of it because that's the way he was. Extremely he made so many patents for Exxon, it's just amazing. There are even some, Robert Ellison Baker III, you can look him up, even has some patents in his own name that are actually online. He's probably was the world's best seismologist and made millions and millions for Exxon. So he went to the very top as a research scientist. So this is the kind of mind that I was interested in and attracted to. So people say, how can you have been attracted to Lee Oswald? Wasn't he stupid? No, he wasn't. He was fascinating. And he was multi-talented in many directions. And he was courageous. And he was honest. And above all, I guess above all, he was genuine and sincere. There was nothing fake about him. Now, he had to pretend to be things to others, but I'm talking about the man I got to know. The man who was willing to risk his life to try and keep our country free. That meant becoming a fake defector. That meant being, his whole family thought he was betrayed his country and everything. But I had already met Knut Nicholson, and I knew that he had to go through things like that. And there's so many things. He couldn't even be friendly to people because if he made new friends, it could interfere with the jobs he had to do. And I could go into all the things he did, and I don't know how much time we've got for all of that, but let's go on as we can. I'm at University of Florida. I think I'm in love. I'm supposed to not be able to have kids, all right? And I get pregnant.
Wow.
I'm an emancipated girl who doesn't believe in God anymore because when I offer my life as a nun to God, what happens? My father kidnaps me and showed me all this anti-Catholic literature. Now, when I said I read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica, I skipped the stuff about Catholicism because I thought I knew it all. Now I find out about Pope Joan and I find out, oh my gosh, all kinds of other things. And then it looked like God doesn't love me. I offer my life and what happens? I get locked up and I can't even do cancer research anymore. And what's going to happen to me? Well, so I became an atheist. I want to tell you something. Big mistake. I now know. I mean, since then, much further down the road, Christ came to me in a dream. And that was the end of that. My spirit went, bingo, that's it. You have to go to the lions. Once you have that experience, you cannot deny it. You'll go to hell if you deny it. It's a terrible responsibility. I don't recommend it if you're not ready for it. Because you can't deny it. If you deny it, you deserve whatever happens to you then, because God's not someone to play with. Love, compassion, and understanding. But he looked at me that first time, I've had a couple of dreams, with disappointment. Because I had kept all those years to myself the truth about Lee Oswald because I was afraid. So we'll get back to that later.
Justifiably afraid, like it's not just...
everybody I know that was involved in what I'm going to be talking about, they all were either murdered or or worse. I want to say worse. I mean, I don't know what's worse, to get murdered or to have yourself blown up and say it's not a murder. I have to fight this because when I talk about this, remember, I see things in pictures and it's like I see it before my eyes. I have a memory that's precise, and that's a problem. So I get emotional. It's like it just happened.
Take all the time that you need.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I haven't had this luxury before, So, again, for anyone who wants to see files and things like that, they're in the books. I've got over 200 files and photos and everything backing up this stuff. And I'm going to show some of those to you tonight if we get an opportunity. So anyway, here I think I'm in love, and I get pregnant, and I have a miscarriage. And I'm in the infirmary, and I miss an appointment, an interview that I have to have with Senator Smathers. So I call him up, and I said, oh, I've missed it, and I barely made my exams and everything. It's just awful. And but I couldn't reach him. I had to tell his secretary, and she was very. The next thing I know, Dr. Oxford's calling me. He said, well, we had already planned anyway to have you come to New Orleans. I said, you're ready, And I'd been sending him some reports. He knew what I was doing. Said, I'm going to send you a bus ticket. And he said, would you like to come to New Orleans? How do you feel about Castro? I said, you really want to know how I feel about Castro? He said, just wondering, he says, I don't know what's the matter with you, Judyth. First you want to be a nun, and then you're going to miscarry. He said, make up your mind what you are, And yeah, I said, I'm sorry, I think I've got my head on my shoulders now and everything like that. He says, I'd like you to come to New Orleans, and I have a good, steady woman you can work with. Her name is Dr. Mary Sherman. What? Sherman? Famous? Her? It's like working with one of those Nobel Prize winners. I mean, it's just incredible. My tongue just, He said, she's a good, steady woman. That's just what you need. And you have an internship with her. And I'll tell you what, go through that internship in the fall. I will put you into Tulane Medical School 2 years ahead of time. Do you want to do it? Are you kidding? I practically drooled over the phone. Yes, of course I'll do it, and can't wait. He says, okay, the ticket's coming. See you. And he said, see you the first week of May. Bam, down goes. What? This is April. Uh-oh. I mean, we're on the trimester system, and everybody in Louisiana is on the semester system. He doesn't realize that I have nowhere to go for at least 2 weeks, almost more than 2 weeks, okay? Where am I going to go? The dorms are closing. I thought I was heading straight to New Orleans. I would call that, where is he? Where is he? Well, we don't know. He's somewhere in Washington, D.C. So I couldn't reach him, What am I going to do? Okay, I can't go home. You know why? All right. Can't go home. Okay, I have now. Going to New Orleans. Like, okay, I don't want to lose you, he says, so I'll come and marry you. So, oh, great, fine, that's real romantic of you. No ring, no will you marry, bended knee, no sunset, no flowers. I'm coming, I'll marry you. I said, well, okay, if you want to, he said, there's he gave me some little things and said, I love you. He said, tear one off every day, and by the time you reach the last one, I'll be there. He said, but I have to go to see my parents first. They think I'm going to work for them all summer. And I said, well, we can find something for you to do in New Orleans because you're interested now in geology. I got him interested in it. English. But when I introduced him to the computer sciences and everything else, which it's something I didn't realize where his talents were. His geology perfect before he even graduated with his master's. He was being offered positions at the best petroleum companies, period, because he aced the GRE with having taken a couple of courses in geology. Wow. It was just fantastic. But that's him. He was just absolutely. Here he agreed in English when I met him, but I got him interested, you see, in sciences, and he just bloomed. So it was exciting for me to see that happening to him. Everything. Little did I know where it would all lead in the end. So anyway, I'm on my way to New Orleans. I said, well, if you come and marry me, great. If you don't, I'll live. Now, that's not really great. Lee said, what to the death? You know, when I come into the YWCA, that's where I'm supposed to go. He said, "Who are you?" I said, "Where's my name on the list?" I said, "I'm supposed to come for another 2 weeks. We can't. We're not going to. You have to go go home. You know, I'm here." I said, "I won't. You know, I can't go home to my parents." So I do. I've got $42, so I have to get a part-time job or something, you know, because this is going to last very long. That's equivalent about $400 a day, but I got 2 weeks, and I don't know how it is. So I say, all right, where's the cheapest room here? Okay, we have one room that has 4 girls in it. You can go in that one. Okay, so I walk in, and 3 of them are there. Anyway, it turned out that 2 of them were strippers. One was a Playboy bunny, and the other waitress. Every other word was a swear word. Now I'm a girl who had been, I had been one night. I had steak dinner. That's what my treatment was, so special by these doctors. I expected to be wined and dined and oohed and ahhed over. Oh, you wonderful girl, you know, you'll love this, and we're going to love you. Instead, they're all gone. They're over somewhere in Central America. Sherman's gone. Oxner's gone. They're going to be back for 2 weeks. And I am now immersed with the seediest people you can imagine in New Orleans, okay? And I'm an asset. I didn't realize it, but I was an asset. Now, what do you do when these girls, they take me to the backyards, you might say, of New Orleans. I get to see the strip clubs from the inside. I see more human flesh than I've seen on a cadaver. How pasties are put on and everything, okay? And they're drunk. They had to give half their money to their men who owned their contracts. And so I saw men throwing up, men handling, trying to handle me. I was shocked, you know, and it was. So here I'm writing. Robert said, "Look, we have to elope. First of all, your parents don't want to have anything to do with you anyway. But my parents don't like your parents because they're Catholics and they're anti." I was hoping for some kind of reconciliation. My father was, you know, and we had them meet. This was cool because here's Baker. She's like 6 feet tall, maybe 5, but she seemed enormous in her heels. Silver hair, wearing a suit, and she had some kind of orchid or something. Okay, we had to meet there, and Robert and I are watching what's going to happen between these parents. And there's Mr. Baker. He's wearing a fine suit, you know, and he orders a cocktail. And there's my mother. She has this glorious blue hair. She's had 2 daughters. Mrs. Baker's had 2 sons. She's smoking with her solid gold cigarette holder. Okay. Mrs. Baker doesn't. There she is with her low-cut Hawaiian, specially made for a very, very fancy, expensive Hawaiian dress. Mrs. Baker's in a suit. My mother has Blakey poodles, the most expensive poodles in the world. They have cats. They hated each other. I mean, immediately. There was nothing, no chance. So we said, okay, we're leaving them out of this, you know. And so he says, well, just send one letter and have to go from my friend. Put on there, don't put your name because they'll throw it away before I see it. Send it to Air Force Base because that's where they're working on their construction projects. And I can pick up the mail there faster. Don't send it to the house. Okay, we'll do that. And you're supposed to be Raleigh Rourke, R. Rourke. Put R. Rourke on the side. Little did I know that Lee Oswald knew an Alexander Rourke, A. Rourke. But my R, he told me later, looked to him like an A because it was cursive. He thought I was writing to R. From R. Rourke. I was sending off a letter to from R. Rourke, Mr. Rourke, but it was Alexander Rourke. He thought it was A. Rourke, and he knew Alexander was guest. And then the itself, it says Robert A. Baker, Eglin Air Force Base, and he knew secret agent, special agent, FBI agent, R.A. Baker, who was Air Force Base. So he thought I was some kind of courier or something, sending off a letter from Alex Rourke to Robert Baker, Air Force Base. Well, it wasn't that, but it gets worse. I had only allowed to send this one letter, and I was saying, is there anything there for Mr. Rourke? So he thought maybe I was trying to pick up mail. Well, I thought maybe Robert wrote to me as if he were Rourke. You know, no, I was very angry because Robert had promised to write every day to prove he loved me, and he wasn't. So I was angry. I thought, oh, if he doesn't come, big deal. I turn around, there's a young man is standing there in the post office. Now, I had come every day to the post office to see if a letter would be there. I had even put a notice in the newspaper. It said Jario. Why Jario? Because he said, don't put your name in the newspaper. My parents will see it. Use Jario. What is that? J-A is for Judith N, and Yo is I-M. So that's I-M Judith. So it's Jario. But Lee saw this. How did he see it? I was carrying this around because I knew Robert had seen it with his eyes, and I can look at it, and I know he's seen it with his eyes. It says, Jario, pretty here, lonely, you know, come quickly or whatever. And so I would carry this thing around, all getting wadded up and everything. And as I handed over the letter to the postal carrier, and by the way, I had also tried to show him ID, so I can't give you anything from work. I don't know who you are, you know, if there is something from Mr. Rourke. So I showed him a letter that Robert had written and showed that Rourke, the name Rourke, was in there. Now, Lee is standing behind me. Okay, that young man is Lee Oswald behind me. This is April 26th. I had arrived on the 19th, and I got myself in all this trouble in between the 19th and the 26th, okay? I actually got a job at, I mean, it's the hand of God. It really is. I got a job. This waitress had wanted to transfer into town. She was way out there near the airport, okay, working at Royal Castle, which was open 24 hours a day. And they gave her a raise and moved her to town. They needed somebody for an emergency till they could get someone to hire for just for a couple hours every morning between 6 and 8 when they had a big rush, okay? I said, oh, good, 2 hours, I'll do it. Yeah, she said, you really want to do this? It's 45 minutes to get there. You only be there 2 hours. You're going to get $2. And then it's 45 minutes back. You really want to do that? I said, yes, that'll pay for my YWCA room there. You bet I'll do it, you know. Okay, well, I had nothing else to do, so I didn't care. Well, the funny part of it is that she said, okay, and she got me the job. So I'm working at Royal Castle for 2 hours a day, early in the morning, 6 to 8. Later, Lee Oswald would tell me, do you realize that when I saw you show that ID that you had been working at Royal Castle trying to prove who I was, that I didn't have any ID, I didn't have driver's license, I had nothing. But there's my name on the check from Royal Castle, because I'd worked there. He said, that Royal Castle was where Bobby Kennedy had a surveillance team watching over the Godfather, Carlos Marcello, Town and Country, which is only 2 blocks away, and they could watch him day and night. And when you came there at 6 o'clock in the morning and only there till 8, I thought you were picking up information from them because you were working there, and because then you left every morning. I thought maybe you had to be a courier. Now, why would he think that? We've got Robert A. Baker, remember? We've got the Rourke. We've got me working at the Royal Castle where Bobby Kennedy's surveillance team is. And this shows how, by the way, that Lee knew what Bobby Kennedy was doing. And there are connections between Bobby Kennedy and Lee Oswald, okay? And even when I first said this, nobody believed me. Now, a lot of that stuff has come out, you know. And we have, by the way, Robert F. Kennedy saying that Lee Oswald loved my uncle, quote, okay? Loved my uncle, and he did. Lee loved JFK. Told me all about him, changed my whole mind about who JFK really was. So anyway, here I am at the post office. When I handed over that letter to mail, I dropped that rolled up newspaper. Now remember, I said I could speak Russian. I used to tease boys or someone like that. I would start speaking Russian to them because they'd say, "What did you say?" And it'd be like an icebreaker. When I looked at Lee Oswald, this nice-looking guy behind me who was dressed, held himself in military style. He didn't look, half drunk and everything like the guys I'd seen so much of. And I noticed something interesting. He didn't have a ring on his left hand. So I flirted with him. So when he picked up this newspaper and handed it to me again, he could see it was circled and it had lipstick kiss on it. He saw the Jario and the code, it's a code. And then I said, "Kodashal Tavares." I started speaking Russian to him, hoping he would say, "What are you saying?" And he answered me in Russian. Oh, wow. Who does that? In the middle of New Orleans? Are you kidding? He said, "It's not wise to speak Russian in New Orleans." Russian. No. I have got to know more about this guy. And he's cute. And he's polite. And he's not married. I thought, by the time I start walking with him, because I'll walk you home. He asked, "Is there anything for," I heard him say, "Is there anything there for Mr. Lee H. Oswald?" And they said no. But that was a ploy, I think, just to show that he had a reason to be there. Certainly, if he had not asked him for anything, I would have been suspicious, but he did. So he's walking home. Okay, I was supposed to go, I was all dressed up, heels and everything, because I was supposed to go to Oxnard's and sign up my papers for my internship, okay? So I look good, I was dressed nice. And now I want to just walk with him because I've got to know more about him. I've got days to go and sign the papers. And then I see he has a ring on his right hand. Uh-oh. My grandma, who's Hungarian born, and my family is a Hungarian Catholic family, all right? She wore her wedding ring on her right hand because that's what they did over there in the Eastern European and Hungary and Soviet Union. He said, "You're married?" I said, "Yeah, you got married in the Soviet Union, apparently," because he said he'd been there for 30 months. And you know what? I knew enough about everything about anti-Castro, this, that, and the other. I knew I was looking at a hero right away. Why? I'm going to take everybody back a little bit. Imagine you've seen North Korea, how they, or you could take the Russians today, I suppose. You know how they exchanged prisoners there and how it went. Can you imagine, please, if someone has come back after 30 months in the USSR and they said, and it was in the newspapers, "I'm renouncing my citizenship. I will fight against anyone who opposes the Soviet Union. I will fight against America." He's walking around a free man. 30 months. He was there 30 months, and now he has been here. I learned about a year. Oh, not quite a year yet, but I think he came in July of '62. Okay, to USA. It is now April '63, and he is walking around a free man. And come on, I knew from my experience with Knut Mikkelsen that this man had to be one of us. When I said, "I think you are a hero," you should have seen his face. He was not prepared for that. It was a shock to him because he'd been sent to New Orleans, it turned out, to oversee a project and to oversee what he pretending to be pro-Castro. Lee Oswald, because of having been in the Soviet Union, was a perfect person who could spy on Fidel Castro's spies that were being sent to New Orleans. New Orleans was a hotbed of opposition to Castro. They were trying to kill him. They had training camps in '62, also in '63, which it took years for me to convince people, but more information has come out. These did exist in '63. Not just, real training camps, not just a U-Haul filled with munitions, okay, and a couple of vloggers pretending to be, anti-Castro, but I mean the real thing. And there are so many other factors, but bottom line is Lee had been sent to New Orleans after having had a bad experience in Dallas. I can't even go into all the details except to say that it's not true that Lee Oswald ever shot at Edwin Walker, General Walker. But he was given an assignment right after Walker was shot to stand out there in Dallas with a Viva Castro sign on around his neck. And he was concerned because the police did. Well, they didn't really arrest him, but they took him into custody, and he had to contact, handlers and all that to get him out of that situation. He said, I can't stay in Dallas because police have fingered me, and they're going to think I shot at Wallace. This is very, very important because there is a note out there that says that it's undated. And it says that Lee wrote this to warn his wife, Marina, that if he got arrested or killed, okay, that she's to do such and such. And they use this letter to show that, to try and say that this is what he wrote because he shot at Wallace, okay? Walker, I'm sorry, I said Wallace, I meant Walker. General Walker, sorry. Wallace and Walker would later go and run for president, vice president, this kind of thing. They worked together a lot. But this is Edwin Walker who lived in Dallas. And Lee did not do that. And actually we have witnesses saying they saw two cars drive off right after the shot happened and so on. And you see a photograph and it shows a car sitting in the driveway. They say Lee Oswald took the photograph, but they cut out the license plate number so you can't see it. Right. That's because Lee would, no, you can actually see another photo before they cut it out. You can see there was a number there. They have cut it out. So they framed Lee for that. But Lee wants out of Dallas. He says, this is not good for Marina. Those police, they now know me. He said, I've got to get rid of my driver's license. He threw it away. By the way, that driver's license was later found. He used to have a driver's license so he could drive. But if the police flagged it, if they ever arrested him, it would be marked with a C or something like that to show that he was a communist. And then they could throw the book at him, So he said, I can't drive for a while. Or I don't want anybody to think I can drive. So that's how that happened. But here's Lee with the situation that he's in Dallas. And I believe, he didn't tell me, but he said he warned Marina. And I believe that note was what he wrote to warn Marina that if something happened to him. When he's assigned, and we have the records. I had to find the records. I found them there on Mary Farrell's site. It took a while to find them. People don't know about that. That Lee in Dallas was doing his first pro-Castro work because he was ordered to do so. He said, I'll be much more valuable in New Orleans where there are a lot more anti-Castro activities going on and where Castro will send his spies and so on. And my family's there, and if something happens to me, Marina will have someone to take care of her. So that's how he really got transferred to New Orleans. And he got his bus ticket on the 24th, and by the 25th, he was in New Orleans. And he actually ate dinner that night with David William Ferry. David Ferry, and I've written a whole book about David because I knew him very well. How did I get to know him so well? Besides the fact that we worked together in this lab at his place, in his kitchen of all places. The bottom line is that David Ferry wanted to be a priest. When he learned that I wanted to be a nun and I was now an atheist, he was doing everything he could to change my mind and make me a believing Catholic again. So we had many, many conversations. And anybody says I didn't know him, that's ridiculous, So I knew so much about him, I've been able to write a 500-page book about him. All right, you can't just make that up. And it revealed the real David Ferry, who never, ever was anti-Kennedy. It doesn't look like that. Because this man was gifted pilot, gifted in leadership, everything. And of course, he was commander in the Civil Air Patrol and had known Lee from then. way before Lee joined the Marines. So Lee knew a lot about him, and it wasn't good at that time what he knew, because David Ferry was a pedophile. Well, I should say a teenage predator, older teenage boys, and wasn't kids, little kids or anything. But nevertheless, he had this terrible problem, and he hated himself because of it. And when I learned his whole story, how he'd been abused by priests himself, when he was a kid, and it was so very sad to learn what had happened to David. By the way, Lee, if his wife was pregnant, he wanted to divorce her. He brought her to the United States because he didn't want to lose his baby. He brought her and baby Jude. But this was not a marriage made in heaven, and they had been fighting a lot. I told Lee, after I got to know him better and fell in love with him, I said, if you lay a hand on her, I'll never speak to you again. It's over. I believe. He said, you don't know everything that happened. He said, but I will never touch her again. We have David Lifton, who didn't like me and didn't want to believe that I was involved with Lee. But before he knew about me, he posted, if anybody can tell me why all of a sudden Lee Oswald never hits his wife again, never, from the time of at least April all the way to the end of his life, he never laid a hand on Marina again. And he listed all the things that he had done before. But I had told Lee, if you touch her, and I'll never have anything more to do with you. And he kept his word. But he did get her pregnant again so that when they divorced, she would not be deported. That's why he got her pregnant again with a second baby. Otherwise, if they divorced, they would have actually, because the anti-Russian sentiment was so high, they would have deported her and the baby that was born in Russia, you see. And that would have, he just couldn't bear that. So that's why he got her pregnant again, so that she could get citizenship herself, or at least the right to stay because her baby was born in America. So these are things that people don't know. Remember how I told you about Lee's passport application? I didn't finish. Something else that he did on that. Remember I said it was done in color. And finally I could prove something. What I could prove is that two different colors of ink were used. Lee's ink was different from the color of what Charles Thomas used, which was fuchsia. It was like a burgundy color. And you can see the difference. Lee's is a regular blue-black ink. Lee didn't even fill out his occupation. He didn't even fill out the occupation on his passport application. Charles Thomas filled it out, photographer, for him. Lee said, put up whatever you want there. It's like that.
Yeah,
You want to take a break for a minute?
No.
Like the good book said.
Okay, everybody okay?
Everybody's just listening. We did have a question.
Yes.
Mark said, Judyth, what would happen if they did release the JFK files, and how would people react?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, we now know that there's not one single file from Mexico City that has been properly preserved. They've all been rewritten, every single one. They've been sanitized. Number two, anything of real value has been destroyed. And I wish it weren't so, but I know it's so. And some people say, well, how come you're not mentioned? Are you kidding? I mean, I'm the last person there they want to keep files on and mess everything up. I've got a lot to say. Fortunately, I did keep things. All right. So basically, we have Lee Oswald, and what is he doing showing up like this in my life? Well, first of all, he's so fascinated by the fact that I'm working at Royal Castle. He thinks I know, I got so interested. I read all of Ian Fleming's books and everything. I knew how to make disappearing ink. I knew all kinds of things because I was so interested in spy craft, what they call, trade craft. And he thought I was more trained and closer into everything than I really was. He takes me, David Ferry wants to know who I am, so I get introduced to David. And briefly, David said, we've asked for a helper, and here you are. He said, I guess they sent a girl because I'm homosexual, and they didn't want to send a guy. So they thought they had a good rate. Actually, this guy was coming 2 weeks later. I beat him too. And we know who this person is too. His name is Michael Riccioto. And he has stepped forward and said that it was he who was supposed to be helping him be ferried. And I got there first, and they thought it was me because I was a girl, and Dave is homosexual, see? So they had various reasons to and on top of that, I brought up, because Lee asked me what I knew about Cuba. I didn't know so much. I said, well, after all, I dated Tony Lopez Fresquet. I said, Fresquet? I said, what do you know about Fresquet? I said, well, I know his father's finance minister of Cuba and that he's CIA. And I said, what? How did you know? So they just thought I had a lot more knowledge, and I was an asset that was witty. I was unwitting. I did not know. By the time Oxner comes back, the cat's been let out of the bag, and I am placed on the secret side of this project instead of where I was going to be. That's how that happened. There was a bunch of coincidences, and to this day, I see it as the hand of God to create a witness to what really happened. There are a lot of other things going on, but briefly speaking, if I'm going to work on the secret side, I have to have some kind of income or something. I can't be in Mary. I can't be in Mary Dr. Sherman's lab. I said, well, what about that? It says, okay, it doesn't matter because Mary's with us all the time. And everything's okay. This
your pocket, and you're better be stiff, and you better be ready to spend money at the bar. And
it's like we should have thought of this to begin with. So there I am, and I'm going to well, it turns out about Alton Oxner had injected his son, his grandson, who was only 2 years old, and his granddaughter with the Cutter polio vaccine. He did not know that it was contaminated and that his grandson in 11 days would be dead from the polio vaccine. Now, the file I sent you shows that. Everybody said, yes, we know, because they also had deaths in California. And by the way, his granddaughter got polio from this shot. I mean, this shocked Dr. Oxner. Dr. Oxner realized that people trust their doctors. I mean, after all, he trusted them, and he's an expert. And he killed his own grandson, okay, with a polio vaccine that was contaminated. That got him deeply interested, along with Dr. Sherman, in the SV40 monkey virus. She, you know from Edward Haslam's research, that she knew a lot of people that were involved with the SV40 monkey virus. And guess what? When I was at Roswell Park Institute, I have a newspaper article showing that I was studying radiobiology, okay? Because you had to have a certain subject you're studying. I told you already about the RPMI 1640 formula. But that was not all I was doing. Are you kidding? That was just part of it. I was also working with Dr. James T. Grace on the SV40 monkey virus. And we have all the stuff that he was doing, and he was doing it along with Dr. Moran and with Dr. Moore. So all three of those doctors at Roswell Park were working with this deadly virus. I say deadly because it was causing cancer in every mammal they put it into. But it's not supposed to cause cancer in humans. Think about that. Because we know the SV40 monkey virus contaminated in 1963 at least 98 million doses of the polio vaccine. And they put it out there anyway. The excuse was, well, we're going to cure cancer anyway, and this is latent. It probably won't make anybody get cancer for years. By then, we'll have cured cancer. So we're not going to tell the public that this material is contaminated because they will lose their faith in vaccines. This is 1963, and they've been pushing this ever since. It's gross. It's absolutely gross. In the newspaper, while I'm working in the lab here with David Ferry and doing. It's disgusting. While I'm working on this in the newspapers, it's showing pretty models drinking the stuff, the oral vaccine that's contaminated with the monkey virus. Right there on the front pages of the Times-Picayune newspaper news. Right while we're doing this, we know what it's got in it. We're doing it anyway. If we actually did our homework, and when they did autopsies, they took samples and looked for the virus in cancer, people who died of cancer, they found them in 60%. You know what? They just don't do that anymore. They don't show you what viruses might have caused cancer in these people that die of it. They don't. They tell you what kind of cancer, but they don't tell you. They don't look for viruses. They don't look for the SV40 monkey virus or any of that's 40. There are 39 other monkey viruses that were also associated with the contamination at the same time. But it makes money. These vaccines make money. And that's the bottom line. And so they gave it. They say 98 million. Okay, and that stopped at 63. That's pretty ridiculous because by 1999, we still know of at least one other company that still hadn't got it all out yet. Very, very hard to filter this virus out because of the way it looks like a little ball, like unrolls and unravels and get right through the filters that they were using. They didn't know it. I've kept up with studying these viruses and everything, and I know what we're facing. It's really bad. People, if you have pure blood, protect your pure blood. Everything more stuff. We don't, and I'm telling you another thing. There's no overseeing how clean the vaccines are when they're manufactured. Nobody is inspecting. They're like at Eli Lilly, I saw they were making LSD for the CIA, and they were making it openly, okay? And it was like a great big, looks like a washing machine. They're making so much of it, and these filthy, because they pull the stuff out and just put more in, and they're not cleaning things up. What are they doing today? Nobody's checking to see how clean their vaccine production is. There's no oversight at all. Nobody is checking to make sure that their vaccines are clean, even cleanly created. If you want to call them vaccines, we really technically should not call the COVID thing a vaccine. What? I can't hear you.
I call it demon juice.
Well, at any rate, I have had, as you can imagine, a lot of death threats and things like that. People say, "Why are you still alive?" I'm not stupid. You know, if I'm not visible, that's the danger. This December, it has been bad because in October, Facebook locked me out for the first time in 13 years. I just said a little too much. And as I say, my books were sabotaged. I really need people to get Lee Harvey Oswald and me. Got to get it out to you guys. It's got the stuff in it. It's got all the files and everything. More files have come out too. There's so much I want to tell you. How much time do we have left? I don't want to.
We can go as long as you like. There's no time limit.
I could go on for 10 hours.
Well, we like as long as you want to keep talking, give us information. I've booked this day for you, so.
All right, folks. I know you can break this up so people can go to the bathroom and things like that. And I love you guys. You know, it's because of love I'm doing this. One, my love for Lee Oswald is forever. And to know how he was betrayed and murdered. And how hard he tried to save Kennedy. And, you know, we do have some record of that now. God bless Abraham Bolden, who recently got a pardon. The pardon doesn't mean much because a pardon means, yes, you did the crime, but we're going to pardon you anyway. That's not, he never did the crime that he was framed for, okay? But Abraham Bolden said a little too much about the real Lee Oswald. For example, he was present when call came in from the Secret Service. He's Secret Service. Came in from the FBI saying, stand down. This is in Chicago because Kennedy's not coming. Well, why isn't he coming? Well, he's not coming because we've arrested armed men, you know, and we've gotten all these, all this information, and, you know, they were going to try and kill him, so he's not coming. So you're not needed, Secret Service. By the way, the informant who told us about this, his name was Lee. And you're trying to tell me that's not Lee Oswald? When I reported back in 1999, Lee told me 37.5 hours before the assassination. By the way, we have a janitor on record saying he saw Lee Oswald across the street from Beckley Avenue, where his rooming house was, okay, doing laundry at midnight, okay, on what was turning into early Thursday morning, okay. That's when Lee called me. And why would he be doing laundry when Mrs. Payne, where he was going the next day, had a washing machine? Well, anyway, we had that record that for some reason Lee Oswald was doing laundry at midnight, okay, the night before. But he had that ploy so he could call me and talk to me. And he told me at that time many things, that we'd probably never see each other again, that he probably was going to die. He said, but you know, he said, my life has been worth it. He said, I believe I saved Kennedy's life 3 weeks ago. If you back up 3 weeks, you'll find out that that was the very, very beginning of November. And that's when the incident in Chicago happened, where they sent an informant named Lee, warned them that Kennedy was in danger. So when I said this 1999, I mean, Jim Douglas and Abraham Bolden, their stuff didn't come out till, you know, years later. Another thing that Lee said, and the History Channel did a story on me, episode 8 in The Men Who Killed Kennedy, which, God bless them, Newsmax is putting on, okay? You can see it on Newsmax. In 2003, even though I had 28 hours at least of recorded material, had 18 hours of film, they condensed it into 46 minutes. I've been accused of, how dare you add to your story? You did your story, now you're embroidering it. I mean, 46 minutes, you know how much you can say in 46 minutes, and that's all I had. Of course, I haven't embroidered. People ask me questions, and I've given them more information. But that was condensed from all those hours of interviews and everything. So History Channel puts it on, and it was only shown. Nigel Turner sat with me in the Netherlands. I had been forced to go there because I was accused of, I said, of creating AIDS. So horrible. And death threats, so I had to leave the country. He's sitting there in the Netherlands and said, look, this is going to be on for 9 years. We've got a contract with them. He also took it for my sister to see, and he also took it for Marina to see. And Marina said, and this is quote, she said, so he had an affair. You know, she knew something was going on, I'm sure. But at any rate, so when we're sitting there and he says, this is going to be on for 9 years, I said, you have no idea. Sure enough, it was shown 5 times, and then it was canceled. And Nigel Turner was savagely attacked and called the man who shamed the History Channel. And of course, I had to flee to Hungary because of more death threats. Oh, it was so much fun. Anyway, I lost. On top of that, they didn't show any of my witnesses, but they did show a big picture of my family. Every single one of them held it on there a long time. Okay, people in my family got fired. They had, some of them got polygraphed. All kinds of bad things happened to them. And to this day, I have 3 high-five children. 3 of them don't speak to me. Okay, so that's the way it went. It's not been easy, but It's not about me. That's why I have to keep going and tell the truth and tell everything that happened. Yes, Lee Oswald worked for our government. Yes, Lee Oswald was a patriot. Yes, Lee Oswald did not kill Kennedy. Yes, Lee Oswald did everything he could. He joined an abort team to try to save the president. That abort team is what convinced Jim Mars to believe me. I was sitting there with Jim Mars and telling him all that was going on. And he's thinking to himself, he told me later, well, this. Then I said, Lee also joined an abort team. He went, what? Went like that. I said, what? Say that again. And so I said it again. He said, nobody knows this. He said, I just found out myself a few months ago that an abort team existed because Tosh Plumlee told me. And Plumlee has only told a couple of people. Nobody knows this. I said, I know that name, Tosh Plumlee. I said, Plumlee. I said, I memorized all the names of these people. Everybody who had the name Lee in their name, I especially memorized, so I wouldn't forget them. So Jim Mars ended up, after vetting me for several years, he ended up writing the afterword for me and Lee. Okay. And the person who wrote the foreword is Edward T. Haslam, who independently, I knew nothing about this man, found out about Mary Sherman, the fact of her murder, and unsolved murder in New Orleans. Mary Sherman, my friend, Dr. Mary Sherman, was killed on July 21st, 1964. That's not very long after the Kennedy assassination. The very day, the Warren Commission came to New Orleans to get testimonies. She's front page news. Do you know how many people decided not to speak when they saw this? Do you know her right arm was totally missing? She was stabbed. She was set on fire. It's like, better not talk. Who did they get to talk first? Dean Andrews, Carlos Marcello's one of his top lawyers.
They sent a message.
Oh, sure, they sent a message, of course, but that's not the beginning. That's not the beginning by any means, because the month before, okay, that was July, all right. In June, Guy Bannister was found. Well, they said he died of a heart attack, but he was naked with a bullet hole in his back, according to his wife and his mistress.
It's quite the heart attack.
Oh yeah, very quick heart attack, right. But Bannister was deeply involved in all of this. He hated Bobby Kennedy, but he worked with him because they had a common enemy, and that was Castro. And if he could have done anything to get rid of Bobby Kennedy, he would. Lee had to work with Guy Bannister. But before him, okay, you've got May. What do we have? Got July, right? We've got June. Guess what happened in May? Hugh Ward blows up in the plane with the Lesseps Morrison, the former mayor of New Orleans, who knew about Lee. They vanish. They explode. They're gone. So we have 3 key witnesses that have died in 3 months. You think anybody's going to speak then in New Orleans? It took the valiant Jim Garrison, who had his own problems. You cannot be DA in New Orleans and be a totally honest guy. You can't. Couldn't get elected. But he was outraged enough to try to do something about this. And he opened a can of worms. And thank God he found out about Riley. And what was that? That was where we had our cover jobs, Lee and I. We had to have a source of income from the outside world. And okay, now I'm going to show you a couple things because it's hard to believe. I meet Lee Oswald on the 26th, okay? That's the day I got my, put it this way, I tried to get my birth certificate so I could get married, right? To this Robert Baker. Robert Baker marries me all right. He comes, then he vanishes. He said, I didn't want to tell you, but I'm going to be gone for weeks at a time. I don't know, baby, when I'm ever going to see you. Maybe I'll come, maybe I won't. He actually sent me a postcard, which I have, that he mailed to me in New Orleans when he was in New Orleans, and I'm in New Orleans. But he was too busy with his friends to see me. This is my new husband. Wow. For all these people, all these people say, oh, how could you be such a horrible woman? And, you know, you got married to this guy and right away you cheated on him. No, I didn't right away, but you can see that I had a lot of reasons to feel abandoned. Why? The day he left, and he was only there one day after we got married, where I lived got raided, and it was Lee Oswald's fault. Lee wanted to get me out of the YWCA area to a nicer place, and he hadn't been to New Orleans for 10 years himself, but he got a contact, and he said, you know where I've got, he said, I know a nice pretty girl, and I'd like to find a good place for her. And they thought he meant that he wanted to find a place for a whore. He had all, see, Lee had all these contacts because his mother not only had dated Carlos Marcello's driver one time and all that, and used Carlos Marcello's lawyers, all right? But also, on top of all that, his mother's sister was married to the mob. His name was Dutz Moret, and he was a bookmaker and an enforcer, a dock enforcer at one time for Marcello. Marcello just loved him. He was a boxer. And when he got too old for that, he gave him a cushy job. He was one of his favorites. So the CIA is working with the mob at this time to try and get Castro. Lee is the perfect go-between. He knows the mob. He knows the CIA. It's one of the reasons they sent him and let him go to New Orleans. Well, there are a few problems coming up because Lee Oswald joined the Marines because he did not want to become a mob member. He could have been. He even knew Jack Ruby from early time. Jack Ruby was sent to Dallas from Chicago, you know, took over Savello's, just another mobster position. But he was always going to New Orleans because his real boss was Carlos Marcello.
Was Jack Ruby and Oswald really good friends?
Jack Ruby knew him very well and liked him very much. He'd known him from the time of childhood. And he thought of him as like, you know, you see a little kid running around, he grows up and he's part of the pack. So he always had good feelings about him. And on top of that, Dutz, when Lee and his mother moved to Fort Worth, Dutz, who knew Jack Ruby, said, please keep an eye on my boy for me, won't you? You know, so they knew each other. I'm not saying, but I know one thing, he sure didn't want to kill him. And we know that Jack Ruby called the police the night before and said, look, they're going to shoot him. And the person who took the call, the policeman, recognized Jack Ruby's voice. He did not want to shoot Lee. And he put it off and put it off. They waited and waited for him to finally show up. And then when he shows up, the horn toots and Lee is brought out and he's shot. And people can be really cruel. I had a very important lecture to give. And it happened in Texas. And I got up, I was going to go down, I have to walk down the stage to get there, to the stage. Rank upon row. And as I'm walking, I look at what they have on the stage. They've got a great, huge movie screen, and they're showing Lee being shot over and over again. You have no idea what that did to me emotionally. And I didn't do a very good job. I had people walk out on me. It was done on purpose. I'm sure of it. You cannot do that to somebody I witnessed him being shot before my eyes, you know, on TV. I remember screaming. I remember throwing up. I don't remember anything then for about like 2 days. My heart was broken. The shock and the horror. And here they're playing this over and over again, and I'm supposed to go and give a talk about Lee when they're doing. That's how they introduced me. Can you imagine?
It sure messed with your mind.
Yeah. And so my friend who spoke later, he got over 1 million views. Mine got like, I don't know, 12 or whatever. I mean, you know, I was just incompetent, you know. I just couldn't function because people don't realize what it's like when it really happens, and it happens inside of you. It's not over and over. You see it over and over again. It's just like I felt shot by arrows. You know, it's horrible. So, and people will do things. They think they're being nice. Oh, here's a present for your birthday. What is it? Kennedy shot. You know, here's a nice newspaper for you. Worst day of my life. You know, and I mean, they don't understand. You know. That's not fun for me. It's deep and it's horrible. And I understand very well. Marina doesn't want to speak about any of this stuff. It's traumatic, especially if you knew him. You knew it. You'd be so outraged at the lies you hear and everything. And you feel helpless. And I love him, and I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going to the end of my life, because I let him down for many years, because I got married, you know, when I told you, and had children, and I didn't want anything to happen to them. But it was only one day after my last child left home, December 26th, she went on her honeymoon. That's the day I took out the film JFK and watched it. And I was so ashamed of myself, because to be silent is to be a coward. Now, I'm not a coward. I just hoped somehow that the truth would come out. It's taken years, but it is coming out. It's taken me 23 years to even be heard this long, because they suppress things. They lie. There are lies about me out there that are shocking. I mean, in my wildest dreams, I didn't think they'd say things like, John McAdams, okay, CIA asset, for example, he wrote that mice can't even be given cancer, that Mary Sherman was not a cancer researcher, that I claim, and then someone else said I claimed to have done cancer research in a coffee factory. I mean, it just, and they would go to people that were witnesses and try to change their minds and even threaten them. So, you know, we've had my first witness, Anna Lewis, who was on, like, said about 35 minutes, saying yes, we double dated. She and her husband, who worked for Guy Bannister, his name was David Lewis, and to talk about him a lot in the book, because we double dated. Anna Lewis and David Lewis and Lee and me, and the reason we did is because they were collecting information about Castro, and they could talk about that stuff, and it looked like just dating, you know, at the same time. So she's online. She got filmed and everything. And what happened to her? She lost her job. The Child Protection Services were called to try and take her son away, who had cancer. She didn't ever want to speak again. And the person who filmed us, who said, I have a better camera, let me film. And we trusted her, and she kept the film for 4 years. We had to sue her to try to get away from her. People know who this person is. And she actually was involved with other conferences and everything. She tried her best to stop my witness from speaking out. And then they said things like, oh, that witness has recanted. So that witness was afraid to even contact me. She was afraid to be followed. But she did tell other researchers, she wrote emails and said, I never recanted. I just don't ever want to be filmed again. You can see why. So she finally got her job back as a security guard. And now she was an armed security. She said, I'll take the job, but then I want to have a gun. So that's why she got hired back. And she got to keep her child too. But it's gross what's happened to the intimidations and the, I've had things stolen from me. I've been stalked. I stopped that by I turn around and take pictures of them. Stop that. Yeah.
Your camera everywhere, start taking pictures of everything all the time. And
got some nasty pictures, their faces look gross. They're staring at me. And like we were going to get it translated into Germany. And it's going to be translated this year into German finally and published in Germany. They've wanted that for a while, but years ago it almost happened. But the person who wanted to get it translated, we're sitting in I think we're in Geneva. Doesn't matter. One of the reason I say this is because we met several different places. But what happened this time, we're getting ready to really do it. Do a contract, meeting at midnight in this nice hotel. This guy walks in, sits down with a newspaper, doesn't order anything, stares at him for about the next 2 hours, and he didn't want to do it anymore. That was it. So they don't say anything. I've written statements from people that sit down with me, and somebody, like this one statement, she says, yeah, we tried to talk, and these two guys came in and kept staring at us until we had to leave. because they wouldn't stop, you know. And so they messed with your mind. Now, they can't kill everybody. Somebody says, well, how come somebody just didn't shoot you? I got shot at in Phoenix. Does that count? The thing is that when you get a call in the middle of the night and they say your mother's dead or something, you can't prove any of this. But I was able to prove one of the things that happened to me when I got hit by these automobiles. I got a call at 5:30 in the morning. Says, you want to have another accident? No, you know, I don't want. Who are you? Well, they told me to pull my manuscript that was with a publisher. So I pulled it, which I will. But they said, you know, it's too late. You're going to have an accident anyway. So I wrote emails to my friends. I said, look what I got this morning. They said, oh, don't be paranoid. That's the answer I got. You know, they're just trying to mess with your mind and all that. I was in the hospital again that night.
Wow.
Hit by a black van. Actually, it was a car that was forced by a black van against me. He had been following me for miles. It was raining hard. We were getting an underpass there in Dallas. That's why I don't live in Dallas anymore. The underpass was filled with water, and as we're going under, I was trying to get away from him. He forced this other car against me, and this sheet of water came up. If that hadn't been for the water there, I would have been crushed against the cement, you know, but it stopped my car from getting crushed. And when we stopped, the woman, he took off. She told the police it was my fault. And boy, was Geico happy because they'd already had to settle 2 others, you know, with me. That turned out it wasn't my fault, you know, because I'd been hit. And they didn't want to do this third, but nope, there was black paint on her car. Okay, from the black van. And so they had to pay. But that was it for me. I moved to Orlando. I tried to get along there, and that didn't work. So I said goodbye to my son. I said I've got to live overseas because that's the History Channel's put this out that, you know, that I've created AIDS.
No, don't worry about the people that are lying, the misinformation, the ones that are trying to discredit you. They do that by design and on purpose to mislead, confuse, divide, right? And the people that talk about, you know, and say things like, oh, well, why didn't they just kill you? It validates you if they kill you. So, you know, sure, they tried to do things in certain ways, you know, to make it look like accidents and things like that because they didn't want your information out. But if they do kill you, it validates everything that you've been saying. And so that enhance kind of puts a little bit more protection. So, and the people are just and then you got the trolls, you've got people that don't believe anything. Then you got the people that are paid to troll you, paid to try to make you aggravated and discourage you. So there's lots of those people out there. You just follow your heart. You just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying. God bless you, because really, I'm saying some of this because of people saying, why that's been the most common thing. Why are you still alive? You know. So I'm going to show you something. I think that will be interesting. First of all, okay, so we had to have cover jobs. So get this, and by the way, you have Dr. John Williams, who's a mathematician, taught mathematics at college, okay, university, and others have done this too, but he's the most prominent. But so he says we have to have cover jobs because, first of all, I have to have a job that shows I'm getting money, you know, from somewhere to pay for my family and all that. But I can't really, I put that many hours in anywhere. So at Riley's, and we have the record showing they've worked with the CIA for years, okay. They're going to hire me, but I have to have somebody handling my clock outs. Because I can clock in, it doesn't matter when I clock in. Sure enough, you clock in at 8 o'clock once. You're supposed to always clock in at 8, only did it once in 11 weeks at Riley's. The other time is 8:15, at 9:32, 10 o'clock, 8:30, 8:45, 9:15, so on. I'm clocking him out at 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock, or 5:30, right along. You can go look. Because I had to make sure that, because he was nowhere to be found to clock himself out most of the time. One time I clocked him out at 7:32 p.m. because he came and picked me up and I forgot to clock him out. We went out, we had to go back and clock him back in. He said, how are we going to cover this? And I said, well, I'll just say I was working late and you called in and said you forgot to clock out. So, you know, I covered it that way. But you'll see that my initial J is on Lee's time cards and made 40. That he worked 40 hours when he couldn't be found, see. So they bring the card to me and say, look, we don't know where this man was. And I was working for the vice president as his secretary, for finance and security. So any bad time cards came to me, and that's how we cleared him, see. And that's all in the book. So we had this one time, we had all these time cards like that, and I don't think there was one. Were there any? There were like 5 cards, 5 weeks when he wasn't actually in trouble. Somehow he managed to cover, you know, everything. All the rest, in other words, the majority, I had to cover because they were no good. So here we go. We have very interesting statistics here. Lee Oswald and I are hired not by Riley. First, we are sent by A1 Employment. We've had a bunch of employment agencies, but both of us, coincidentally, okay, are sent by A1 Employment to Riley's on the same day, the 9th. We're both interviewed by the same man, Mr. Prechter, on the 9th, and they were hired for Standard Coffee Company for 1 week. That's where our records got laundered, okay? And you can look at all those. I saved all this stuff because of what happened to Lee and because I was intrigued. It was part of record keeping anyway. I was always doing it anyway for research. So I just kept these records too. So I've got all the paychecks and stubs and everything from way back then. I've got them all. And so we're there for 1 week. And on the 17th, we're transferred the same day to Riley. What a coincidence. Now, Lee is there at Riley's, and I'm covering for him on all that. He's going to get fired on July 19th. He got fired because of an incident that happened with the green glass. They had to cover that up so I wouldn't be noticed, you know. So they just fired him. On July 20, there's an ad comes out to replace me. What a coincidence, right? Right. Well, since I was only being paid, minimum wage because that was just a cover job. Nobody would take the job, so they put a second ad in to have because they forgot to raise the pay. Nobody would take the job for that. That worked for vice president, secretary at a low pay like that. So we have a second ad that came out. So I was still there on August 9th, the day that Lee got arrested. Okay, for handing out FPCC flyers. I was seen with him. So I have a check that shows that I was fired from Riley's on August 9th. I've got the check stub. What a coincidence. I get fired on the day. Yeah, right. All these are coincidences, right? Yeah. Also coincidence that we both arrived in New Orleans for the first time in my life, first time for him in 10 years, and the same week. We left the same month, never to return. On and on and on it goes. We have lots of these so-called coincidences, and they're not. They're just not. So here's something interesting. I'm going to show it to you. This is Lee's, from Lee's address book. Let's see, can you see that? See that little house there, that the schematic?
Yeah.
That's my apartment. He actually has it in his address book. See those X's? Nobody knows what those X's are. There are 3 X's. See if I can get them close enough. Can you see the X's?
Yeah.
All right, the X on the outside there is where the key was on the outside. The X's on the inside is where I had my microscope and my stuff that I had to work on. He said if something happened to me, they'd have to get this stuff out fast. What do you mean something happened to me? I said, you know, what do you mean? But the fact of the matter is, Robert Baker was not around. Most of the time, he would show up once in a while with dirty clothes for me to launder and sex. And that was it. And then he'd be gone again. It was pretty awful. But So here, that's not the only thing that's in his address book. Here's another thing. You see, Lee was not just involved in anti-Castro stuff, but he was also helping to smuggle in guns. And this also was for anti-Castro. But we have very interesting, let's see if I can show you. Hold on here. Okay. Now this is a little harder to read because of Lee's not so wonderful handwriting. Let's see if you can see this. All right. I hope you can see the words Caracas at the top there and guns. See that?
Yeah.
Further down you see gun and ring and all that. That Caracas and guns is because of we now have files that have come out showing that when I said that Lee was involved with gun running and these guns were coming in from Caracas, and here you got it in his own address book. Nobody knew what that was about, okay? But the whole setup and how I actually got involved, that's how come I know about it. The Caracas, Venezuela, these guns were being shipped in there, and they were brought in by ship, by the Delta Line. We now have files showing the Delta Line was being used by the CIA to smuggle in stuff. But when I first brought this stuff out, those files were not available. And in 2017, more files became available showing that, because they said, well, you know, you're saying that this gun running, we don't have any CIA files. Well, some came out showing that more guns from Caracas were being shipped over to Miami to anti-Castro people there in December. And of course, this was earlier. This was in June, early July, in June, when this shipment happened. But it's, you know, and then we have a whole bunch of others showing that I said that they were marking some of them as if they came from Castro, you know, and so on. So all that has come out. And of course, I have more witnesses, too, that have come out. I've already told you about the Charles Thomas family. I told you about Anna Lewis, but that's not all. And I also told you her name is Claudia Roddick. She's a little girl who spent the summer with her grandma. And where was that? Her grandma is Susie Hanover. My first child's name is Susie. I was so close to Susie, I named my first child after Susie Hanover, okay? My landlady who knew all about me and Lee and loved him. She had known him for years. She used to teach arts and crafts at churches. And Lee had taken some of her classes. He gave her a puppy once when he was growing up. And he knew her. And so he felt really badly after he had said, I'll get you out of the YWCA and I'm going to put you, I found a nice place. And it was. This place is in my book. I have taken people there. The owners have let us in and they have verified that murders and all other bad, horrible things happened in this gorgeous mansion.
Wow.
That happened this year when they took people. It's been photographed and everything. Yeah, a whole group. They let us in, and I got to see the parlor where that Lee had got rented for me. It turned out this was a house of ill repute, high class, a house of prostitution.
Oh, okay.
Lee didn't know that. When he said that he was trying to find a place for a pretty girl, they misunderstood him. and I looked a lot different then than I do now. But, you know, 80 does that. I mean, I'll be 80 soon, you know. But back then, I looked pretty good.
Beautiful.
Anyway, it was, thank you. But the thing is back then, I would get hit on, you know, and all that. And anyway, so I'm there the day after Robert leaves. I mean, it's only hours after he leaves. I'm raided in the middle of the night. And the police, I'm in the front parlor. It's closed up. They're going upstairs and bringing these women down dressed in handcuffs and feathers. And that's all, you know. And but the men are coming down dressed in fine suits. They're obviously muddy and they covered up, you know, for girls. They got taken away. So this policeman, bam, kicks open my door, which was a sliding pocket door kind of thing. And I mean, it's gorgeous, gorgeous front room, which I've got pictures of, and it's in my book. I'm sitting on the swing because Lee and I would sit on the swing. It's still there, everything. But he says, "Girlie, come in with me and all that." I said, wait. I showed him, "This is my brand new marriage certificate. Where's your husband?" "Well, he's out at sea. He went to, he's out on a quarter boat, Bob it's called, but I don't know anything more about it. He wouldn't tell me where he is. I can't reach him. He wouldn't give me his address or his phone number or anything, because he said I try to follow him because I'm so mad at him, And he finally believed me, thank God. So I'm out there they take them all away, but I'm out there on the sidewalk. I've got Robert's guitar. I've got a typewriter. Thank God I had not moved all my stuff yet from I had kept stuff at the bus station because I was going to stay at the Y, but I hadn't moved everything over. So I had 2 suitcases. The guitar case was filled with clothes. I had a box of books, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, St. Charles Street, and this truck goes by there going, "Linda!" Pretty girl, and oh boy, I mean, the last thing I need is more attention from any Cubans or anybody. Forget this, I hate you. I hate all men. I forget you. Look what's happened to me. My father, what he did to me, and I'm all wrapped up in this mess here, and I was in a whorehouse, and how can it be that this nice guy, Lee Oswald, put me there? Oh, so I'm hating them all and kicking along. I hid the box of books finally because the bottom fell out. I mean, it got worn out, kicking along. And I'm going along, and I was going the wrong direction. I always get lost. God gave me a brilliant brain, and then he said, "I'm going to fix you so you will not ever be very proud." I cannot find my way to the bathroom in a big house, okay? Forget it. I get lost in my own backyard. I mean, it's hopeless. So I went the wrong direction. I thought I was going to turn around. I had to go past the place again. Now it's all boarded up and lock on it and closed by the city and all this kind of thing. And I go and I see a light, and it's in this church. It's St. George's Episcopal Church. Turns out that Father Bill Richardson is one of the most kind people on earth, practically. He always let everybody in, and even let me in. Knocking on the door, "Oh, help me." And they let me spend the night. And the next morning, only phone number I had to call, I'm not going to call David Ferry, okay? Because I didn't know him that well, and I was so suspicious of him. But Lee was responsible, so he comes over. He felt horrible. And he's the one that got me moved over to Susie Hanover's apartment, see? He said, "You're going to be living close to me now." So he already knew where he was going to live. All right. There's no doubt about that. And we have Adele Edison saying that everybody knew where Lee was going to live a couple months before he ever moved to Magazine Street. All right. So I'm only blocks from him now. And he just felt horrible. He called up. It turned out that Jack Ruby himself had given information to him, because Lee had gotten Jack Ruby's number because Jack would visit David Ferry. So that was somebody he knew to call, because he hadn't been there himself that long. And he had gave him the number for a guy called Picoro. Anyway, Mr. P, it turns out big shot. And Mr. P had recommended this. It turned out Lee felt horrible. He felt like he really owed me a lot, and he did, So after, melting down and everything, all that. Anyway, it turned out that I'm now going to be at Riley's, and that was, this was May 2nd, May 3rd. On May 4th, we're looking in the newspaper. I'm on the bus with him, and Lee was so pro civil rights, and I was too. We had that in common. We're sitting in the back of the bus. People who say that Lee and Oswald and I didn't know each other, we're going every day, every morning to Riley's. Okay, this is by May 10th, 11th. Okay, and we get our first check the 17th. I say we're still over Standard, but then we're going to Standards or Riley's every morning, and every evening we're coming back. Get this, he gets on the bus, all right, at 8:25. I get on the bus at 8:26 because it's only one stop away. The bus is filled mainly with black people because most whites had their cars. We didn't own cars; they were brand new in New Orleans. Do you think he's not going to notice this girl getting on the bus every morning? And not only do I get on at the bus stop that he's at, all right, I mean one after him, just across Napoleon, and then stops there for me. Now it'd be a couple more minutes if we had to wait for the light, but I mean basically that's what it was. I'd get on, but then it stops at Riley's, and we both get off at the same time. They're trying to say we never met. How? You know, it's just impossible. So anyway, I knew how important it was. I saved let me see this. I saved all of our checks stubs, my check stubs, and they match his exactly. His finally came out. They finally put one of these out. It took a while before they released any. And as for the time cards, I had to pester someone who knew people at the FBI to release them. They never put them in a Warren report. Oh, they've got my J on it. Stuff that had anything to do with me, you can't find them. But the FBI had them. Those time cards were never placed in any of the 26 volumes or anything. It's got my initials on it. It's got my writing on it. And by gosh, you could not see them. At about 2004, we got them. Okay. Because I had enough contacts with people who knew the FBI, and they got them released. And now they're out there. So when I say they're out there, I mean they really are out there. Wonder if I have, yeah. So it turned out that Mary Farrell, the Mary Farrell site showed three of my time cards I had signed in the J's, that two of the J's, I mean, there were supposed to be two J's there, and they're missing, erased. They were not happy campers about that, all right, in National Archives. So they actually gave me copies, okay, that were certified and marked and with all kinds of documents and documentation. Because they were very upset that they had taken these files. Now, can you see them? I cannot.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, the J's there are not easy to see, and these are partially erased on this one, but those are J's. And here's another one. This is a set where they're kind of faint, but you can see the J's. You can see them. And they're missing. They're missing from the files that are online. They've been erased.
Disappeared.
Oh, yeah, they're gone. They're just gone. Now, maybe they've replaced them since then and put them back. But the point is they gave me these documents here and signed them and everything to prove that they really did have the J's on it. So when people say, well, we have records missing, where are you? Well, I can tell you there are reasons why some of these records are missing. All right, they have erased them. I can't get my own birth certificate. My birth certificate that got me into high school and from up north and everything and got me into college, oh, they're missing. Instead of saying my name, it says female infant now. Can't use them for anything. And Exxon was able to get a copy for me. Boy, they've got power I don't have. But except for that one birth certificate from 1986, I do not have. I tried to get one in 2017 or 2018. And it says that my father's name instead of Very is Ward, W-A-R-D. It says my mother's name is Gupta. I mean, it's of Gloria and so on. We can't use them for anything to validate me, you know. And many of my records have just vanished, you know. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, they've done everything to try to erase and discredit you.
Well, that's what the thing is that people, thank God I have people who have known me all my life. And then we've had wonderful, astute people have come along. And, you know, so there are many files anyway that I do have. And I love, that's why I've held conferences. People have seen them for themselves. Now back to Riley, what was going on there? I am working it's very interesting because there were other employees there that were also working for the CIA, and they left and most of them went to Michoud, the rocket facility, and Lee thought he was going to be sent there too. Everything got messed up. Everything got messed up. We got involved. What we were working on is a project now to get specific, to kill Fidel Castro. Why? Oxner had an idea, and it was a good one. His children had been affected by a contaminated vaccine because he had trusted his doctors, and he's a doctor. He's a researcher. I don't know what I see a comment here. Do you remember the original document looked like? Did it have a gold seal? I don't know which document they're talking about there.
I think it was the birth certificate, and then they said, Kimberly asked, why do you think that they're being removed, these documents?
Well, because the more I show, the more people have to understand that these things really happen, and they happen in the order I say, and that I have verification for them. It doesn't matter because now I have many more documents have come out, especially about Mexico City. So important about Mexico City. This is where we fell in love. Lee does not want to stay married to Marina. By the way, you'll notice that when he returns from Mexico City, he has opportunities. Before, he always found an apartment right away for himself in Marina. He doesn't this time. He doesn't because he doesn't really ever, no matter what he may say to her, pacify her, he's not searching for an apartment anywhere. He leaves money. Now here's something really touching. Remember how I told you that he carried his wedding ring on his right hand and not his left. When we held hands, my wedding ring, which I had to buy because the man I married didn't even buy me a ring. Okay.
The one that you're supposed to stay faithful to.
Yeah, right. No, he didn't, so I had to buy one. And the only one I could afford was too big, so it kept falling off my hand. But basically, I put some tape on it so it would hold on, because I had to look married to live, to be Mrs. Baker and everything, because I was Mrs. Robert. See, I was Mrs. Baker at Riley. I was Judy Very with David Ferry and Oxner and everybody. When I married Robert Baker and had to hide, I was Mrs. Robert Allison Baker III. Now, all this helped me. And the other is that I joined the Mormon church. You're not even called Judy there. You're called Sister Baker. I mean, you even lose your first name as a woman there. And I was a Mormon for 17 years. I loved the Mormon people. I was protected. They didn't know who I was, but I was very safe. Nobody knew who I was, Just tried to vanish. Because that's what David Ferry told me to do if I wanted to save my life. I couldn't get in the newspapers. After Lee was shot and killed and everything, Dave called me and he said, you've got to listen to me. You have to be a vanilla girl. And what you need to do is don't get your maiden name in the paper. Your name, V-A-R-Y, is too rare. And the newspaper reporters are going to remember you. They're going to wonder what happened to you. And then they're going to find out that after New Orleans, you quit doing cancer research. They're going to wonder why. So it was a big deal. So I did not go to my own sister's wedding. I didn't go to my grandparents' funerals. One grandparent died before. There's an error in the book that says all four, but that's an error, an accidental error. But 3 of my grandparents, I couldn't go to their funerals because my name would have gotten in the paper.
Wow.
And it's horrible. I completely cut off all contact with all my friends. One of my witnesses, her name is Dr. Kathy Santee. She's a doctor. We were taking pre-med courses together at University of Florida. All those have vanished. They were off my record. You can't find them anymore. But God bless her. She has written, said, yes, that I told her that Dr. Oxner said I would be working at the Oxner Clinic and everything going to New Orleans. She remembers that after all these years, and she's written about it. She wrote about it 2 years ago. It's in my book. So there's a living witness again that shows that I was sent to New Orleans by Dr. Oxner. I told her so, and she remembered. And she's a wonderful doctor, and I'm just grateful for that. So I have this and that witnesses. They come up on different parts like that. And I'm very grateful that they have spoken out. Like we have another her name. We have another witness who she. Well, I can go to witnesses all day long. I've got a dozen of them. I'll just put it that way. That's the easiest way. But so Mac McCullough is important because he was mob, and so I was discredited saying it doesn't. If he's mob, that doesn't count. Come on, it's ridiculous. Everybody uses witnesses wherever they come from, but he saw me and Lee together. He said he called us companions, you know, and he saw us playing chess together at Palmer Park, and he's mentioned in the book because we met suddenly and recognized each other. What? We both said at the same time, New Orleans, like that. And we're talking about 35 years later, you know. It was just wonderful. It's wonderful. I have a little story to tell, but there are many stories to tell, but go back again. So we're at Riley's, and at that same time, I'm working. Now, why would Lee be involved in all of this?
This question, so there's people that believe, so I'll read it out. It says,
I've already read it. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it says, why does Judyth think, or what does Judyth think about the spate of new evidence suggesting that the JFK assassination was fake? Could it be that Lee's death was fake too? Search also Mike Mattis. So a lot of researchers and some people that I've been talking to knew this interview is coming up. They're saying, and they're researchers, they've been looking at all the video evidence. They believe that the JFK assassination was fake because, you know, him getting hit in the head, there was no blood splatter, you know, for the people beside him. Like if someone did get a headshot.
Who? You mean Kennedy?
Kennedy. Yeah.
You have Hargis, the motorcycle guy, who's completely splattered with Kennedy's blood and brains and pieces of his bone.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I just know people that are, this is what people are, some of the researchers.
Yeah, well, no, there's a bunch of disinformation because people are naive. But we have two, this motorcycle guy behind him to the left, meaning the shot came from the right through his head and exploded to the left, all right? Hargis almost went insane. He was covered with blood from Kennedy, absolutely covered with it. You have, what they did is they washed off all the stuff off the car at Parkland so you couldn't see all that stuff. And they have done something to the Zapruder film because Jackie Kennedy crawled onto the hood, onto the trunk of the car there and picked up a piece of bone, and it had brain matter in it from behind, not in front. Now it did explode in the front too, but that's because that's the way the wind was blowing. All right, so you've got to look at the way the wind was blowing against all that. Know that we have a piece of, it's a Harper fragment, it's called, it's a big piece of bone that was blown out behind and found behind the car, okay, as it's going along with force. There's no doubt that Lee did not shoot Kennedy because we can see that shot came from the front and he's forced back into the left. You can see it, okay? Back into the left. That shot came from the front. Lee Oswald was positioned in the Texas School Book Depository building way back behind the vehicle. Now, there was a shot, a dum-dum, that just plowed into Kennedy's back. It's what they have a name for that when they're sniping. It causes the person to be rigid, so they can get a good shot. Make it a shot. This bullet didn't go very far into him, and we can go. There are a lot of details. Dr. David Mantik is a good one. Mantik. As for Lee, he was wearing a black. He was wearing a black sweater over his T-shirt. They didn't even give him a real shirt change or anything. When he was being let out, they dressed him like a villain, okay, all in black. But that was to stop any blood from showing. We have plenty of records showing that he was shot in. They did it, the mafia style that was used showed that they respected Lee. That's the way I look at it, because they usually shoot him in the head if they're like snitches or something like that. He got shot in the Christ shot, the one that's like Christ was hit with a lance, you know, into his heart, into his chest, into his side. And that's what they did with Lee, which is a sign, of, if you want to call it that, of respect. But it's very painful, but he might have lived. And indeed, Jack Ruby was very, very upset, and even smoked. He didn't smoke, but he even asked for a cigarette. Then he got all calm after he found out that Lee had died. And Dave told me, because he knew Jack well, excuse me, it's really not easy for me to talk about these things.
It's okay, just breathe. Just take some time.
Yeah, I found my knot in my throat. Let me put it this way. They've put out a lot of misinformation. It's just like saying that JFK Jr. is still alive and things like that. JFK Jr. was too brave to hide for years. All these stories come out there to confuse people. They put out 1,000, but I want to tell you what, there's only one truth. And by the way, it's logical. You can follow the path of logic and what makes the most sense, and you'll get to the right answer. It's Occam's razor. He was shot. They took him to the hospital. They put him in an ambulance. They had oxygen there, and they did not give him oxygen. We had the record showing that it didn't charge for oxygen. You can see the oxygen tank in there. They did not give Lee Oswald oxygen on the way to the hospital. There are other dreadful things they did I really don't want to talk about, because they're trying to say that they treated him without prejudice. I don't know how they can say that when they wheeled him into trauma room 1 and then wheeled him out again because, oh no, we can't have him in here because that's where the president died. So they rolled him out and put him in trauma room 2. The man is bleeding to death, and every minute counts, every second counts, and that's what they did. 2 or 3 minutes lost right there. And I could talk about other things that went wrong that they did, because I know my medicine, and it's really disgusting. And then we have LBJ calling to say, get a deathbed confession out of him. Deathbed? Why is he calling it a deathbed confession? You know what he wants the doctors to do, or he would have said that. He was to get a confession out of him. He wouldn't say deathbed confession. That's the President of the United States calling. By the way, the other call that man made while Kennedy's body was still warm was to a stockbroker saying, you need to sell the Halliburton stuff that, that Lady Bird has. Why? Because they're going to start a big war, and Halliburton is going to make billions. And so will LBJ's friends holding the stock for him. Okay? So that's what's on his mind while Kennedy lies dying. There's a lot more we could talk about. See Phil Nelson's book, LBJ, Mastermind of the Kennedy Assassination. Now, I don't go as far as say mastermind, but I'll say this. They couldn't have done this and got away with it without LBJ knowing about it, and he had many motives to do this. They were actually in session accusing him of bribery with the mafia at the very minute that Kennedy was being shot. If that had reached the floor, the committee like it was supposed to, LBJ would have gone to prison. Now, LBJ had the choice to either try and stop the assassination, say, no, I don't approve of this, or go to prison. Now, you think he wanted to go to prison? We're going to have forever. Why are they saying this is a matter of national security and we can't put out the other files? If I told you that Lee told me that he got hazard pay when he was in the USSR, extra pay, okay, and he put it in a fund for Marina in case anything happened to him, she gets $25,000 anonymous after the assassination. Anonymous. That's worth $250,000 today. He got hazard pay. Do you think they're going to show you that? If they ever release the records, they're going to be doctored, sanitized, or copied so beautifully because we have the technology now. They'll say the real things. Don't believe it. They would have handed them out way before now if they were genuine, and if they didn't cause trouble. But they will, because Lee was one of ours, and he was given hazard pay when he was a fake defector to the Soviet Union, our own CIA. He was borrowed by the CIA from the ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, That way the CIA can always say, oh no, he wasn't CIA. They can deny it plausibly, called plausible denial. There's so much. Lee told me, you know, he had nobody he could really confide in. He knew he could confide in me. He tested me a few times to figure that out. So anyway, like Lee and I are walking along, and our hands, when we touched each other, our rings clink together. Clink, clink. It reminded us we were married. It was very uncomfortable. It made us miserable because we had standards, you know. We didn't want to cheat on anybody. We loved each other and we weren't being treated right, okay, by our mates and by any means, all right? George and Warrenshield says how Lee's wife would make fun of him in his Russian. Oh, his Russian stinks. Well, she should have said that because George and Warrenshield had the same accent that Lee did. George and Warrenshield was born only 10 miles from Minsk, where Lee learned his Belarusian Russian. So you've got Marinas really making fun of George and Warrenshield's Russian as well. And he didn't like that at all, as you can imagine. He said that Lee's Russian was faultless. It was excellent. So it had an accent. So Jack Kennedy had an accent, was speaking excellent English, right? Boston accent. So Lee had an accent, yes. But we have the Mexico City saying, oh, this man with terrible Russian is speaking to Kostakov, the assassin. That could not have been Lee, because Lee spoke fluent Russian. And when people say, well, how can you hardly knew Russian yourself, how can you say you spoke fluent Russian? Believe me, I could tell. I knew he was speaking great Russian. And I knew how bad mine was, all right? But that Lee knew he had somebody he could talk to who was interested. I mean, here I knew Russian. I knew all the stuff about the anti-Castro people. He had to tell me and force me to understand that Lee was working for the CIA, but his heart was to protect the president. He saw what the president was up against, and he convinced me to love JFK, the man they accuse of killing JFK. It's so ironic. And then you go look, when they tell him that he's been charged at the midnight conference, that he's been charged with the murder of Kennedy, look at his face. It's the last thing he expected. They really kept that from him for a while. He knew that they'd try and get him on some charge, but he looked so disgusted. That is not the face of somebody who wanted to kill the president. Go look at his face. It's right there in black and white. Now, I'd like people to ask questions. I really would, but I wanted to especially talk about Mexico City and the project, because the project is why we do not have a lot of the material released. It's bad enough that you hardly ever hear about the contaminated polio vaccine these days, and the SV40 monkey virus running around, that they won't even check cancers to see if that monkey virus or anything like it, okay, is in the tissues of people who die of cancer. They're not doing that. They should. We need to find out where these cancers are coming from. All right. I've got a good idea, and you should by now also. All right. Because we have an epidemic. They keep saying we have less. No. What we do have is people, they say, well, look, we got more people dying of heart attacks. But then when you look closely, you'll see that people are dying of heart attacks because of chemotherapy. Because they had cancer. So yeah, their cause of death is heart attack caused by chemo, caused by cancer. So if you factor in the various ways that other deaths are happening, and they're attributing them to anything but cancer, keeping a lot of this kind of under wraps. We really, and by the way, if you are told that you have prostatitis, or that they've checked you and oh, they've done a biopsy and they found out you have cancer, and they tell you, keep that little thing in you. Why would you do that? Why do you keep it inside of you? Because they're going to make a lot of money off of you. When it finally becomes so cancerous, it's going to invade the rest of your body. You're going to die of the most horrible bone cancer. That's what happens to so many of them. Get it out. You can take exercises. You can find good doctors who can get it out without it doing that much harm to you. Or keep the little walnut in you and have it keep pumping out cancer cells in your body until they can make a lot of money off of you. That's what they do.
Do you think biopsies shouldn't be done because once you break it open, the body's actually put a protected covering around it, and as soon as you cut it open, now it stops that protected covering, and then it spreads through the body?
Well, here's the thing: you put the needle in, and they're not telling you. If you look at that needle and it's aspirated out, and you take it out, it's got little cancer cells connected all over the needle. They're clinging to the needle on the outside as well. And then as it pulls it out, it's releasing those cancer cells into the body. They don't stop that. And they've irritated it. It's a teeny tiny thing. Get it out, then play with it. The other thing they should do, and shame on them, give people chemotherapy when they should take these tumors out first. No, not number one. Number two, if there are lots of little spots, that is a problem that needs more help. But let's say that they're taking them out and you don't see any extra spots anywhere. You don't have any metastases going on. So you have these cancer biopsies that you can take out of the tumor that you've removed. Go ahead and put them in petri dishes and go ahead and grow them and put chemo 1, chemo 2, chemo 3. Find out which one works best instead of experimenting on your body and just shoving something in you and you don't even know whether it's going to work on that kind of cancer. This is what they're doing carelessly, foolishly, but they make a lot of money because if first chemo doesn't work, then they're going to do radiation or they're going to try another chemo. Chemo will shrink it, but it doesn't kill it. Very rarely. Now, if it's blood, that's something else. Leukemias and things. After all, you can keep replacing the blood. You can finally get rid of it with some chemo and so on. So you're going to have more help, good results, but not. It just breaks my heart. I have also seen several people die of lung cancer. Lung cancer often is just a certain part of the lung. You take that out and you can do just fine. It heals. 2 of my very good friends, their families made them go and get chemo when they didn't even have any metastases, no other, and they died of the chemo. It's disgusting. Of course, also, they got a lot of money too.
My dad, they diagnosed him with lung cancer, and he wouldn't listen to me about trying some alternative things, and he trusted the doctor, and
He's dead.
He was dead in 11 months from the time they diagnosed him. He only lasted 11 months.
That's their fault. Again, what should have happened, and I'm sorry that happened to you. Believe me, I wanted to cure cancer. I didn't want to see people hurt by this. Instead, I watched the devastation. I watched the carnage. And I see them making all that money in their cancer palaces. Yeah, if I end up dead, it's been worth it. Just to try and tell people what's really going on. They've got to understand that when you are diagnosed, especially with lung cancer, almost always you can cut that part out, and that's it. You go ahead and heal up. Don't let anybody touch you with radiation or anything. Let it heal first, okay? Then check, a few months later, a few weeks later, however long you think you can wait, and see if there are any spots, anything else coming up. If there's nothing, leave you alone, okay? Change your life, eat right, and take the supplements that will help you. There are resveratrol and others that are just wonderful out there that can help you. And for heaven's sakes, let them leave you alone, especially with lung cancer. And it's heartbreaking to see how many are dying of it because they go ahead and fiddle with them. And I don't know what your father's condition was, how far in advance, what stage was it at?
I think they said stage 4, but I know how much they lie, and I know they just want people on to the chemo. They get $1 million almost for every cancer diagnosis. So I know there was a guy caught in the USA for diagnosing people with cancer when they didn't have cancer. It was like 300 people that, because he gets this little cut for every single person he diagnoses for cancer. So I think there was 300 cases that he got caught with just alone of people he diagnosed that didn't have cancer. So it's crazy what people will do for money, and it's sickening, the medical mafia and the sorcery that has been kind of blasted into humanity.
some of these doctors are not even to blame. When they go to medical school, it's the big pharma is financing what they're being taught. And the grants are going to look into ways to so-called combat cancer that will be profitable for big pharma. They're not even being going into alternative kinds of research. For example, bacteriophage, I saw, to my horror, instead of using bacteriophage itself, which is a very simple little virus, it looks a lot like the polio virus. Easy has a little platform on top. So anytime polio 2, there's a little platform on top. Think of a mosquito or something with a little flat spot on top, like a little sucker, between the legs. It's like that. Very simple, very, very, very simple. In fact, they have actually recreated, how dare they, the polio virus. Why are they rebuilding polio virus? They shouldn't even be doing it. But anyway, they've got it. But with the bacteriophage, which is easily manipulated, you cannot even patent anything because it's so easily changed and still work if you do it some other way. That little platform, they're putting chemo on top of that and sending the bacteriophage to the cancer. In other words, making sure that it can recognize cancer, but instead of attacking the cancer itself, it's delivering packets of chemo, which they can make money off of. Sickening. All right, so as you can see, I'm no fan of, but here's the thing, a lot of the doctors don't even know any different. They're not particularly, IQ 130 or so, they've got enough brains to understand what they're doing, but they're not being taught properly.
They're not just taught, they're not allowed to. And any research that goes against the medical mafia is squashed. They do the testing. If they don't find the right results, then nobody sees the light of day of different research. Like, this is a very protected, well-oiled medical mafia machine.
Well, how do you think I was able to give cancer to mice in only 7 days? Because I wasn't taught by these people to think certain ways. I came in a blank slate, and said, wait a minute, this doesn't seem logical. Why are they doing this? I'm going to try this. And by gum, it worked, that's long and short of it. And why aren't they using, it's shocking to me that we have ignored many avenues, of course, that would have cured cancer by now. Unfortunately, there's no money in it.
Is cancer man-made? Angeline's asking here, do you believe cancer is from the shots and the things that they put into cigarettes? You mentioned earlier.
No. Cancer comes from many sources, both even by physical. You can irritate a part of your skin and make it so irritated it'll finally actually become cancer because it'll build up various toxins. Normal exposure to normal radiation, radon even, can mess up your DNA. There are many ways, but we have so many ways now to protect our DNA, to protect our mitochondria, to protect our RNA, and to fiddle with RNA, with messenger RNA, when they've all, and stick people with the COVID vaccine as they have done, it's an indictment. It can't go unnoticed in history. It just can't, unless we lose all of our culture. Now, we can have history rewritten. The winners rewrite history. Anybody that tells you that Lee Oswald didn't die then, or Kennedy didn't die, or whatever, or that somebody, it wasn't Lee Oswald that shot Kennedy, but it was somebody that was in the car. Their Secret Service did it accidentally, and so on. All these are cover-ups. They're all cover-ups because the truth, frankly, involves